Hey guys, in this episode I'm going to run through some interesting comments from a gentleman called Matthew Sigel. He's from VanEck's US management investment firm, and he's made some, in my view at least, very interesting remarks on his future thesis of Bitcoin. There's a few key messages I want to stress here. The first clip is to do with what he perceives to be the most significant long-term correlation factors impacting Bitcoin.
But to your question about the correlations, the most significant long-term correlations for Bitcoin are a negative correlation with the US dollar and a positive correlation with money supply growth, or M2. So clearly on the latter front, money growth has reaccelerated with the Fed pivot. That may be playing part of a role.
The second clip is to do with his remark about Bitcoin as a non-US asset and where the BRICS have just held a conference in Russia. If you combine the BRICS GDP, actually it's greater than the GDP of the G7 combined. 3 of them are mining Bitcoin with government resources. And in addition to that, he went on to say that Russia has announced an initiative from its sovereign wealth fund to build Bitcoin mining and AI infrastructure throughout the BRICS region to settle global trade in Bitcoin, whilst the West are resting on their laurels.
It's a non-US asset. It's an emerging markets asset. And while we were all hyperventilating about the election over the last week, BRICS had a conference in Russia. There's 6 new members of BRICS this year. So BRICS GDP is now greater than the combined GDP of G7. Of the 6 new members, 3 of them, Argentina, the UAE, and Ethiopia, are now mining Bitcoin with government resources. So there is tremendous urgency outside of the US to find a way to circumvent the irresponsible fiscal policy that we've been running here in the US. In fact, Russia announced an initiative. Their sovereign wealth fund is going to invest in a regional initiative to build Bitcoin mining and AI infrastructure throughout BRICS with an idea of settling global trade in Bitcoin. So look, someday, I don't know if it's 5 years, 10 years, Putin's going to die. We're going to look to reintegrate some of these countries into the world financial system, and they're going to be trading with Bitcoin. What are we going to be doing?
And then finally, the last clip, he makes a 2050 Bitcoin price prediction of $3 million Bitcoin, and where he envisages Bitcoin at that point as a 26-year vision to become a global reserve asset with some Bitcoin allocation to be held by central banks. The 3 million may be a bit too conservative because it's going to be much more than that, but nevertheless it's interesting to watch.
We have a model that assumes that by 2050, this is very long term, that Bitcoin becomes a reserve asset that's used in global trade and held by global central banks at a very modest 2% weight. And in that model, we arrive at a $3 million price target for Bitcoin. Now, that sounds, extreme, but that's a 16% compound annual growth rate for a couple decades. That's not really that extreme. So into the millions over the medium term is a high conviction call.
So hopefully you found today's episode insightful, and indeed we are heading the right direction in terms of significant Bitcoin appreciation in the coming days, weeks and months ahead of us. And the message is simple, is to stack some sats and hold it for the long term. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe and share this video, and I'll see you next time.